Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the full moon coming up in Sagittarius on the 31st of May. Now, I'm really going to be focused just on that because I covered the second half of May in my previous update, and I'll put the link for that below, but that was already a very full video, so that's why I'm doing a separate one just on this lunation, this full moon in Sagittarius, which is so exciting, I think, for the 31st of May. I'm filming this because of other work commitments on the 13th of May, so this is still before the new moon coming up in Taurus on the 16th. If you prefer to wait until after that new moon to watch this video, then obviously please do. That's your choice. And just to say, we still have a very powerful aspect coming, not only with the new moon in Taurus, which I think has its own sense of power because it's out of sign conjunct Uranus and conjunct Algol, as I described in that video, but also on the 26th of May, we have a very strong square between Mars and Pluto, 5 degrees of Taurus, Aquarius, and that can often be a might makes right aspect in the world. It's excellent for your own willpower and focus to get a job done. It's terrific for that, but it can work on the world stage as a kind of strong assertion of power. So we'll see how that works, because remember that also Pluto is hovering around the ascendant of the chart for China as well. So yeah, let me just talk about some of the themes around Sagittarius before I show you the chart. Now, we had a new moon in Sagittarius back in December 2025. So if you go back to then and see what new seed, new beginning was happening for you there, look particularly to the house area where you have Sagittarius. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to the link below and you can get a 2-part video series that you can watch forever, as often as you like, to help you find these points in your chart and what it means for you in your life. This isn't a personalized birth chart analysis, these are teaching videos, but if you look to where Sagittarius falls in your chart, which house area, that could trigger your memory as to what was beginning for you last December, that is now at this full moon coming to culmination, to completion, to closure in some way. And always a full moon has the potential to shine a bright light, because Sagittarius is linked to the truth. Along with Aquarius, because we have Pluto in Aquarius, it's one of the two signs linked to the truth. It's also linked to freedom, adventure, travel, spontaneity. It's got a feeling of expansion and the future. It's very honest as well. Sagittarius energy just tells it like it is. It's very straight, it's very honest. It's interesting that it's linked to flight, of course, so is Uranus and Aquarius, that it rules. That is more aviation. There's a slightly more of a sort of engineered sense with that. But Sagittarius is also linked to travel because it's linked to flight. And it's remarkable, actually. I'm going to put the video I did on the update on the big picture below, because I know a lot of you enjoyed that. And in that video, I talked about a very short dream I had, that I was at an airport. I'd lost my luggage. I looked everywhere for it. The plane was going off to some new and exciting destination. I didn't know what that was, but the plane was now leaving. I had to get on the plane without my luggage. And I got a very clear message that you can't take the old baggage with you to the new destination. And the number of people that have commented on that, both in the comments below the video, but also have written to me separately to say they had an almost identical, very similar dream. So this is a very strong theme at this time, that we have to leave the old baggage behind. And this is very true also of our belief systems, which Sagittarius rules as well. And there's a very strong kind of theme in the zeitgeist, clearly, that we are shifting to some very new levels in our energy, our frequency, our experience, and we just can't take the old luggage, the old baggage with us. So, yeah, this is very much about truth, about freedom. And I think, again, we are in a whole phase of revelations and secrets coming to light, not only because it's a full moon and that's a classic time for secrets coming to light, but also, as you'll see in a moment, Uranus is conjunct the sun and opposing the moon at this full moon. And that's, again, about truth and revelations that could be quite shocking. So, so let me show the chart, but I think possibly how this will operate for us is because Sagittarius is so linked to our beliefs, is that in the light of this full moon and whatever surprising, shocking news revelations are coming out around this time, because I think they're going to come in waves from now on, all through this year, is we realize that our old beliefs are too limiting for the news that's coming out right now. They were too narrow. They were too small. And we have to reframe our beliefs for our future moving forwards. But that is probably also going to cause some radical shifts in our perception, Uranus in Gemini, that will lead to not only new and expanded beliefs, but a new and expanded sense of meaning. This is a big call for more meaning in our lives, that if our beliefs have been found wanting, that is also at the same time a suggestion that we need more meaning. We need beliefs that we can rely on, that correlate with our current and future experience, if all that makes sense. Now, very often, as you'll see in the moment, as I say when I show the chart, Uranus conjunct the sun, opposing the moon. We've had some very strong Uranus energy recently. It was at the anaretic degree of Taurus. It shifted into Gemini on the 26th of April. And I said at the time that could well be linked to power outages or cyber attacks or that kind of thing. And just as an example of that, in April, in France, some hackers actually got hold of the data from 19 million people from an organization called the National Agency for Secured Data, ironically, because it wasn't that secure, France Titre. And this was the database for ID cards. And that was hacked in April, and 19 million people lost their personal data. So this is the kind of sudden, shocking thing connected to technology and disruptions that I'm talking about, and going to be sporadic. So back up your data, be very careful in what you share, be careful in the websites you're on. I'm not linked to this in any way, but there's a very good service that other people have recommended called Incogni, which constantly scans the internet and helpfully deletes you if they think you're at risk by being on various websites. So it seems to be a very good service. It's not expensive. It has great reviews. And my personal experience so far has been very positive with that. So there are things like that you can do. So we will have an urge to speak our truth and be authentic, be who we are. And that is absolutely true at this full moon in Sagittarius, but it's an ongoing thing out now until 2033 with Uranus in Gemini. It's also actually, that is reinforced by Pluto in Aquarius as well. And of course, Uranus and Pluto are now in positive aspect. So let us take a look at this chart for the full moon. So this is happening on the 31st of May. And as always, I set this chart for England. So ignore the clock face, ignore the houses. We're just going to look at where the planets fall and their aspects to each other. So the moon is very highlighted here because, if we take out the dwarf planet of Homer, we can see very clearly that the moon is kind of what's called the handle of the basket. because all the other planets are essentially virtually in the opposite hemisphere to the moon. So it's very, very much highlighted. So as I say, it's going to be highlighting our belief systems where they've been found wanting. The moon aspects so many other planets in this chart. It aspects Uranus, as I've been saying, because it's opposing Uranus. The Sun is conjunct Uranus. It's also opposing Sedna, just about a little wide for Ceres, but it's certainly picking up Sedna here. It is in a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. So always at a full moon, we have the potential, even if it's not in a water sign, to feel a lot of feelings. Jupiter is in a water sign, and it's in this aspect to the moon, which is going to expand our feelings about freedom, I would say, truth, authenticity. Remember, Sagittarius is one of the two signs connected with the law, along with Libra as well. So need for greater sense of self-care, but also this sense of we want an expanded future versus where we are. We want more freedom. We want to be heard. And we want to be heard is emphasized by Jupiter square to Eris. Remember, feisty sister of Mars, dwarf planet, who was the only one not invited to the wedding at Mount Olympus, at the wedding of the gods. And she turned up anyway and created mayhem. And she demands truth, equality, justice, every voice to be heard, nobody to be excluded. Very rebellious, very revolutionary. And of course, Uranus is the planet of revolution and rebellion, conjunct the Sun, opposite the Moon. And this Mars-Pluto aspect, which I mentioned before we saw the chart, is still operational here. It's waning slightly, but Mars-Pluto is very forceful and also very revolutionary. And remember, we are in a decade from 2025 to 2035 of Pluto out of bounds to the south every year from August to December broadly. But the whole tenure, this whole decade that we are in, is about the power shifting to the people in a much more revolutionary way. And I've mentioned Rosie Finn's brilliant 20-year research that she did, extraordinarily detailed research. And I'll put the link for that below again, which I've often referred to, because she just went into so much detail going back for almost 4,000 years in her research of Pluto out of bounds that it's hard to argue with. So there are a lot of things that suggest the people really stepping into their power as well. So Sagittarius has a restless urge, or restless kind of urgent need for change with the opposition to Uranus and the Sun's conjunction to Uranus. Uranus comes up in prominence when it's highlighting areas of life that we have already outgrown. So see where these early degrees of Sagittarius fall in your chart. What have you already outgrown that is being highlighted at this full moon? And that it's suggesting that we have to change a whole way of thinking to lead us to a much more expansive view of our future. And I think this is absolutely where we are going. Now, there's a lot of information coming in at us. There's a heavy emphasis here, Mercury in its own sign of Gemini as well, heavy emphasis in Gemini of information, facts. This tends to be mind energy, rationality, but Uranus and Sagittarius are much more connected to intuition. And Uranus, as I've mentioned, is really making a decision in the moment. When you're faced with a series of circumstances and you've got to make a quick decision in a moment. And that's going to be highlighted as we move towards June the 12th, when Uranus comes to, it's already in a T-square to the nodal axis here, north node, south node, but that's going to become even stronger when it's exact to the nodal axis, square to the nodal axis on the 12th of June. So that could bring up issues around technology, what we're going to choose. Remember, Gemini is the sign of choice, our galactic connections, making radical changes in our life, perhaps. It gives us the potential for breaking free, because in its square to the south node in Virgo is about our past daily habits. The south node is always about the past. Virgo tends to be about our daily habits. Are we going to continue those same old, or are we going to move to our future path of growth? This is our collective future path of growth, and make a different choice to expand our future potential, to give us that sense of liberation, freedom, upshift, which Uranus is promising. But a lot of information is going to be coming in at this full moon because of that Gemini emphasis. And there's a lot of mutability in this chart with all of those planets and dwarf planets, Sedna in Gemini, and also, of course, Sagittarius is mutable fire. So 9 degrees 56 of Sagittarius is actually conjunct the US ascendant, the country's ascendant, in the chart set for 4th of July, 1776, Philadelphia, 10 past 5 in the afternoon. It's known as the Sibley chart. It's extremely well used by astrologers, and that ascendant, that identity for the US, is at 12 degrees of Sagittarius. So this full moon is conjunct that. So it's shining a light on America in some way. If we cast the chart for Washington, D.C., Pluto is very tightly conjunct the midheaven, government, leadership. So that suggests that big issues around the power of government at this time in the full moon, are going to come up. Is extreme power being asserted in some way? Is that now being challenged with this much more revolutionary energy? Don't forget also that at the new moon in Taurus on the 16th of May, that is conjunct the US president's midheaven. It's also conjunct the moon for the EU, for the European Union. And that moon is in the 10th house of the EU chart. I'll put the data below so you can take a look yourself. And it's also the co-ruler of the 10th house, i.e. this is shining a light on the government. So because that new moon in Taurus at 25 of Taurus is conjunct Algol, the fixed star, at 26 of Taurus, it could suggest there could be leadership changes in various countries beginning now in a bigger way. And by the way, it isn't just Algol, very dramatically about people losing their heads or losing their positions. If you are born with a conjunction to Algol, particularly with one of your personal planets, you can be a very powerful person in this life. Queen Elizabeth II had her sun conjunct Algol. So we also have Sedna and Ceres here, conjunct Uranus as well. Now, we are all well aware of the situation with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. So this Uranus is disruption to trade, Gemini. Ceres is the centaur that's obviously very linked to food production and grains and harvests in particular. Sedna is also linked to food production from the sea, seafood. So yes, we could see some disruptions in food supply. So as always, as I've mentioned several times, really just make some basic plans for that. Even just growing microgreens on your windowsill, if you live in an apartment, even that will give you great nutrition. But yes, we whenever we have Neptune, which symbolizes oil, in a fire sign, we tend to have inflation. And I mentioned this quite some months ago. And we had this in the roaring 20s. There was a lot of inflation then. We had this in the 70s. You may remember or be aware that in 1973, there was also an oil crisis then that was connected to the Yom Kippur War. And again, the issue was oil, and there was, petrol rationing in some countries, etc. That doesn't necessarily mean that all of those things will repeat. Yes, there's the potential for them to repeat, but we are at a very different level of consciousness now than we were in 1973. So, some people are talking about these things being very extreme in the way they play out. There's, yes, absolutely the potential for that. And if you focus on it, that's what you'll tend to experience. Whereas if we put our focus elsewhere into the expanding possibilities coming in that this full moon is very much about, then we'll have a very different experience. And so the way we experience what appears to be one overwhelming prevailing reality is very different depending on where we put our focus. I know this is a drum I keep hammering, but it's so important that we are so powerful in choosing where to put our focus and the resultant reality that comes from that. Our focus is as Paul Levy says, our superpower of creation. It's our superpower of creation. So you may notice here as well that I have some scribbles around the outside, things that aren't included in my SolarFire software package, to my knowledge. And these are remarkable. These are the four fixed royal stars of Persia, and I will go through them. They're called the 4 Sky Watchers. And this is from Persian cosmology from 3000 BC, over 5,000 years ago. And the way fixed stars operate is they stay at 1 degree for 72 years. So, very roughly the length of a life expectancy currently. And they are known as celestial guardians of the sky. They are believed to influence leadership, which is very interesting. We're talking a lot about leadership here. And also major world events. They tend to come into prominence at times of major world events. All of them have the potential to steward in, to help to create new paradigms, which is very interesting because they are all at very prominent positions at this full moon. So, for instance, the moon at 9:56 of Sagittarius is conjunct the fixed star Antares. It's within 10 minutes of exactitude of conjunction to Antares. Now, Antares, as the fixed star, is the watcher of the West, and it acts as those people seeking enlightenment or a deeper understanding of the universe. Remember that Sagittarius is the sign linked to metaphysics and a search for the interconnectedness of all that is. It's this restless reaching out to the cosmos. So then we have Aldebaran opposite that. So it's tightly conjunct the sun here. Aldebaran, can't see my spelling very well, it's Aldebaran. This fixed star is at 10:07 of Gemini, so it's within, 12 minutes of an exact conjunction to the sun. Aldebaran is the watcher of the East and linked to Archangel Michael, so a very strong sense of protection here. Regulus is at 0 of Virgo and is connected, it's conjunct the, it's a little bit wide, but I will allow this considering all of the others are operational here. So this is, Regulus is the watcher of the North. It's linked to Archangel Raphael and very much connected to healing. It's also connected to kingship. And Regulus in particular, but all of these fixed stars, these 4 stars of Persia, will bring ruin if, let's say, the owner, the carrier of the conjunction is out of integrity. So, for instance, if you or anybody in the public eye has a very strong conjunction to one of these fixed stars and they are acting out of integrity, these fixed stars traditionally bring ruin. That's the symbolism. A beautiful fixed star of the south, the watcher of the south, is Fomalhaut. Fomalhaut is at 352 of Pisces, and it's linked to Archangel Gabriel. Very much about the messenger, if you like, from those archangels. And Fomalhaut is known as the spiritual teacher and guide. So again, if you have natal conjunctions to any of these, it's very powerful. My natal moon is very tightly conjunct Fomalhaut, and Fomalhaut is spelt Fomalhaut. So they operate very powerfully. And Fomalhaut here is particularly powerful because it's conjunct the North Node, and the North Node always is our collective, well, in a general chart, is our collective path of soul's growth, our future collective path of soul's growth. In your own chart, of course, it's your individual path of soul's growth. And it has a mystical, magical quality to us. And if that's where we're headed for the future, that has great promise. And again, it has an ethereal quality. It has a kind of Neptunian quality, quite an angelic quality to it, I think. So all of this, I believe, is really reinforcing this idea of a strong shifting consciousness. And in the update I did on the big picture video, I talked about us funneling towards a very powerful, it's really 3 months, but it's particularly July. It's kind of June, July, August. August is eclipse month, but July has extremely busy astrology where it feels like a climax or a crescendo of many energies. And I'll talk much more about that as we get closer to it. I also in that video talked about the square between Chiron and Pluto, because Chiron on the 19th of June is going to tip into Taurus and then be an in-sign square to Pluto. So again, I've covered that in that video. So really would encourage you, I'll stop sharing here, really would encourage you to be the change you want to see in the world, as Gandhi said, be the change. And I looked at the Sabian symbol for 10 degrees of Sagittarius, because you always round up to the next degree before you read the Sabian symbol. And it is a golden-haired goddess of opportunity, a golden-haired goddess of opportunity. And of course, Sagittarius as a sign is all about opportunities and possibilities, expanded possibilities. So just know that, we are the connector of heaven and earth. We are acting like antennae for these new frequencies and new light codes coming in to help them connect to the earth, to help the earth integrate, and the earth is helping us integrate. We're in this sort of symbiosis with the earth right now. And we really are going, as we know, through a massive consciousness expansion. I mean, so many people, and it may include many of you watching, are feeling much more psychically sensitive. Your dreams are much more vivid and active. You are developing a much stronger sense of your healing or your telepathy. You're seeing in brighter colors. I mean, I'm seeing in incredibly kind of luminous colors in nature. Everything is just lit up in nature. I'm just dazzled by it. It's like I'm going to a nightclub when I go into the wood. It's just overwhelming how the frequency of nature through my own eyes and maybe through many of your eyes has just jumped an octave. You know, we really are jumping octaves in frequency. And Dr. David Clements has said many times that we are going through a whole series of evolutionary waves as we move through this year. When our consciousness is ready, another evolutionary wave will come in because Source knows we can handle it at that point and it won't kind of blow our circuits. So really do know that this shift is happening through our own consciousness. It's not happening via an external savior or an external event or a we've waited for how many years. It's happening through us because we are co-creating and weaving with these incredible waves of new possibility, but it's down to each of us. And so even people you know in your own life are probably having very different experiences of reality. And, are the challenges with the current war and the Strait of Hormuz and, what's happening with oil, etc., are they going to lead us to an incredibly tough few months, years? Well, that's one reality. Yeah, that's absolutely one reality. And as I said earlier, if you focus on it, you'll be living that reality much more fully. But we are, as humanity, we are much more creative than that, particularly now that our consciousness has moved to such a different place, is such a different octave from where we've been in the past. There is not just one reality, as I say so often. There are 8 billion different realities. So get together with people that you feel you're on the same wavelength with, you can support each other, you can share. I think that's really important as we go through these rapidly moving times. And, a good practice, because Sagittarius is very futuristic, a very good practice at this time is to shut your eyes and just take a few deep breaths and then imagine you are stepping into your future self. Can you visualize your future self? Can you breathe into that future self? And what advice is that future self giving you in your dreams, through your heart, through your automatic writing, Gemini? What advice is your future self giving you to help you to integrate from where you are to magnetize in more of that incredibly exciting future self energy? Very simple and really very empowering to do. So I hope that's helped you. I've very much just been focused on this full moon in Sagittarius. Quite a few videos coming up in the next few days. And of course, I'll go back to my regular update for the first half of June very soon. God bless. Hope that helped you. Bye for now.